Well, the time is just gone 8:29 a.m. and of late and in recent years, we've become so used to this because every now and then you have some loose cannon, some hate monger putting out, using social media, putting out a voice note, spewing hatred, spewing xenophobic comments aimed at certain groups of people. And yesterday, I received a voice note, or in fact, it was posted on the Salam Media group, where we had one of those hate mongers once again making reference to a particular group of people, and this was largely aimed at the Indian community, making mention of things like coming by ship to South Africa and you don't belong here, and there were just so many inflammatory comments that it's not even worth actually talking about. But this is exactly what our nation has become. It's become racist again and xenophobic, and together with that, all the problems that are compounded by corruption, by crime in this country. And we've been proudly calling our nation a rainbow nation, a nation that is united through our diversity, a nation that is united in more ways than one. And just how much do we read when these types of inflammatory messages are circulated on social media? And more importantly, looking at what those that have fought against apartheid, that have fought against our freedom, that have fought for democracy, people like Nelson Mandela and others, would they have been proud of South Africans as we see South Africans today? And this is the reason why we are talking with the chairperson of the South African Muslim Network, Dr. Faisal Suliman. Dr. Faisal, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jummah Mubarak to you and welcome.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inayat, Jummah Mubarak to you and the listeners, and thank you so much for having me.
Yes, Jazakallah as always for your time. Dr. Faisal, what has become of our nation?
Clearly the Rainbow Nation, or the non-racialism project that characterized the Freedom Charter has fallen away. Clearly exacerbated or speeded up by, if ever there was one. I think the euphoria of the mass democratic movement, and then everyone uniting to fight apartheid. Then the transition with President Mandela's first term, maybe, President Mbeki's first term as well. And after that, I think, that veneer of complete Rainbow Nation and unity started to fall away. It's clearly been made much worse and exacerbated by the economic deterioration, the lack of law and order, etc., that you mentioned. And not unexpectedly so. You see it even in Europe when people feel jobs are threatened, the kind of right-wing shift you've seen all over there against foreigners. And yet there's a bit of a contradiction. You don't see that with Ukrainians. In fact, it's been the opposite. You've had stories of Ukrainians in the UK complaining there's too many Muslims and Indians in the UK. They don't feel comfortable. But anyway, coming back to us. So that voice note that you referred to is one that emanated just after the looting and the killings that happened in the Phoenix area. Wrongfully, in my opinion, referred to as the Phoenix massacre. Those of us who were victims of not only the looting, but also the attempted entrances into the suburbs. We had to mend the roads. If that didn't happen, I think that violence would have extended the destruction into our homes as well. But clearly at the moment when one looks at the kind of language that the EFF is using as well in support of this call for national slavery on the 20th, open threats. I mean, the videos of EFF vehicles on loud hailers saying, virtually threatening to have businesses. And it seems at the moment the videos I've seen have been in India, in so-called Indian business areas, and of course it could be wider, saying if you don't close, you're going to be subject to looting. Now, in a country with law and order, first of all, Mr. Malema would be, and whoever's making those calls would be sitting, facing, charges of threats of violence, intimidation, and incitement to violence and intimidation, especially the incitement part. Here, of course, and this is one of the problems, the absolute and complete breakdown of law and order. And it's going to end up with a tit for tat racism. On one hand, the clearly because of the vast majority of people in our country are black, the vast majority of poor people are black African. Crime and our propensity in this country for very violent crime, it seems, is going to be committed more by my black African people on the front line. But behind the scenes, the middlemen, etc., could be Indian, could be Muslim, could be white, colored, whatever. The reaction to that is becoming more racism. The people refer back to the looting. Then you see someone like our taxi drivers who drive like maniacs, and you see all of these people are the same. And they look at one example of someone who's been badly treated by an Indian, whether economically in the shop, at home, whatever. And all Indians are the same. So that divide is clearly getting worse. Social media spreads it like wildfire. And I think, the one thing we have to do is give context to these things in its proper place. I don't think, as a minority group that's been targeted specifically, we need to be ashamed of being here. We need to be made to be felt as foreigners, that we need to go back to India. It depends how far back your timeline is. But the reality is that the indigenous people of this country are the Khoi, the San, and the colored people. The colored people, of course, we know their origins in South Africa, and the Khoi and the San. So depending on your timeline and chronology, everybody else came from somewhere, whether, check with your cattle, the Guni is from the north, or by ship, or wherever the Europeans and the Asians, etc. But it's about a timeline, and our constitution, and you mentioned in your intro, the fact that, everybody was involved in the anti-apartheid struggle. Clearly, we know that there were layers of apartheid, and Indians were the top of that layer, more or less, but still laws apply to us. So coming back, I think as a community, what we need to do, one is give context to these things very quickly so that they don't get out of hand and exacerbate racism and all sorts of tensions. Secondly, like I said, it's a pity that we do have a country, the government at the moment, that is absolutely spineless in various ways. So you can have people go out on social media and incite to violence. It seems, unless the only community you cannot say anything about it seems to be the Jewish community, and there whether by their own hand or the government influence, you see very strong reaction. If anything is even perceived to be anti-Semitic, etc. Thirdly, is for us not to be to be made to be afraid to have to defend ourselves if and when necessary. One hopes it doesn't come to that as a community, but certainly in terms of the protection of your private property, of your businesses, etc. I don't think we need to be afraid to have to learn how to defend ourselves and do that. I think that it's your defense of your life is and your property is guaranteed in the Constitution. It's a human right, and therefore we shouldn't be given into intimidation. At the same time, where there are fault lines in our community, especially at the socio-economic level, at an employment level, again, where they are, we clearly cannot say everybody is doing this or everybody is the same or everybody is the devil. Those we have to fix. Racism has to be addressed more in the masjids, etc. The plight of workers that we are, by and large, a business community and the front line of retail. Then domestic workers, people who work in the garden, labor, all of that has to be addressed and has to be fixed. We cannot be pointing to others when we have fault lines within our own community. So it's a combination of all of that in life. One is to do the right thing ourselves, but at the same time, not to be made to feel the shame, not to be felt that, we are temporary visitors here, we are not. We have every right to be in the country and enjoy the benefits and the responsibilities that we have to this country. Now, the larger question often people think is, and this is something we all have to start re-looking at, is, our community, as we all know, experts at social welfare and feeding in all of this. And some people think this will, you know, clearly this is an Islamic duty, but others also feel that politically it's a good thing because it creates a better image of Muslims and people will see, um, Muslims in a better light. I think when there's mob violence and just like the extremists in our own community, in our own religious fraternity, those who are inclined that way don't look at that. Ask for those of us who worked in the townships for decades. We did not
Yes.
take up
But
to the
also,
township.
Faisal, Faisal, I can understand what you're saying. But also, the question is, where does the buck stop? And the buck stops right at the top. And the reason why I am raising this issue is we have lost a history in this country. Looking even at this present government, that history of our contribution to this country, our contribution to the struggle has been lost because nobody talks about it anymore. It's been lost to the new generation. It's been lost to the youth who are not even aware of the contribution of the various minority groupings in this country in the struggle to get to where we are, that we can proudly say that we are a democracy right now. And, in the absence of that history, even the actions of the government prove to us. And recently, we've seen the cabinet reshuffle. When we're looking at people that have been marginalized, that are now excluded from the governance of the country, excluded from parliament, excluded from being cabinet ministers. We've seen that in KwaZulu Natal, where an entire provincial executive, there was not a single Indian that was represented. And then with the NEC, we've seen a few token appointments that was made as an afterthought after certain noises were being made. So what I'm saying is that history has been lost. And this is the reason why we see some of these inflammatory comments in social media coming up, making these type of comments, because people don't realize, people don't appreciate what minority groupings like our community has contributed to the country in the past and are still contributing.
No, I can't disagree with you. Look, like I said, even the teaching of history in schools, for example, um, Women's Day, and we've written to the SABC, for example, many times to say, mention, for example, Ruth first, etc. There's no mention of Rahima Musa, for who was at the forefront of that struggle. Similarly, with the teaching of history in schools, it's become a very black nationalist type of history, ignoring, as you say, to some extent, we also partly responsible in the sense that of the newer generation, very few have proportionately have entered into politics, gone and joined. Our voting is, as you know, as a community, very, very low. The percentage of people who go out and vote. So it shouldn't be a justification for what has happened, but we could have done better ourselves, and we still can do better. But clearly, the number of if we're talking about Muslims of whatever race that have entered politics in the past 20 years has been very few, even within the ANC, the ruling party, for not historical, but mainly for the reasons of foreign policy. We've been averse to encouraging people to join the DA, the Freedom Frontier. Of course, they could be different kettle of fish. Even if I give an example, for example, the Hindu community has very, very strong roots and influence and power in the IFP, almost to the extent of virtually almost controlling the IFP, and that's to their credit. They saw the advantage to it, and they mobilized towards that in some quarters, especially the business quarters. So to some extent, we could have done better, maybe more representations in Parliament, etc. Can't change the past. Yes, there's absolutely our contribution is forgotten. But by and large, if you look at the youth, generation X, Y, history don't matter to them. It's about what's now and what we want now. And, we have to see even the intimidation of Indian students on certain campuses, deliberate intimidation. I've got first-hand reports of this happening. So, you guys, you've got so much money, not understanding that money that they see is not an overnight accumulation. If a young girl, Indian girl or whatever, has a motor car or whatever. But they see that and they want it now. So, yes, Um, the non-racialism project, I think, is over. It's a thing of the past. The question is how we now organize ourselves going forward. Elections coming up. We clearly know the days of shooing in people into the ANC into top positions, as you mentioned. The cabinet and the PECs in various provinces, especially a province like KwaZulu Natal with such a significant Indian population. It was made clear no more, for the sake of racial unity or inclusiveness, are we going to put in one or two Indians? It's not interested. Um, so we now have to work forward. As I said, at one hand, it's to be able to protect ourselves simply because you cannot rely on the police. We've seen in KwaZulu Natal in July 2021, you can't rely on the army or anybody. So that is a sad thing because it's going to end up with vigilantism. It's going to end up with people taking the law into their own hands. Um, but at the same time, you need to be able to protect yourself. We have to fix the fault lines within ourselves, but more importantly, we now have to organize our communities towards encourage younger people, join political parties, make your presence felt at branch meetings, um, let drown out the voices of the extremists, and of course, get our community to register to vote in the various elections, to attend meetings, to start, educating ourselves. And this has to happen at all fora, on platforms like these, on the masjid platforms. People have orators, people have ijtimaa. The days of saying these events are apolitical, it won't matter when you reach a stage where you can't have it, or you're afraid that 50 people in red t-shirts are going to pitch up there and intimidate you at your own event. So we have to start preventing that now. Islam is not a apolitical religion, and we cannot say, our events are apolitical as well. We have to use every platform we have to educate, to mobilize. I think as a community, in terms of social welfare, we punch way above our weight, but is feeding enough? Maybe some of that money has to be transformed into more sustainable things. People, you feed today, after 3 days you didn't get food, you're not so happy with the same person. Whereas if we can transfer a lot of that funding to more sustainable projects, I think it would be better than, just continuous hampers and that sort of thing. I think we need to move away from that. We also need to be able to teach our people self-defense skills, survival skills, all of this. It sounds weird, but this is where we're going. We start reaching in winter 7 and 8, load shedding on a regular basis. Make no mistake, looting, crime, mass violence is a real possibility, and we cannot have our heads, in the sand.
Well, Faisal, you and I can continue. There's just so much more that we will unpack, but I'm hoping at some point in time we can have a detailed discussion with a larger panel because there's just so much ground that we can cover, as far as this particular aspect is concerned. But unfortunately, time has run out. But at some point in time, we definitely will revisit this discussion. For now, have yourself a great Jummah, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and I look forward to, as you say, a more in-depth, less nuanced, or more nuanced discussion about this, because clearly there's a lot to unpack, both in the positive and negative sides, and more importantly, on how we can move forward, what we can be doing to mobilize our communities.
Jazakallah for that, Faisal. As always, assalamu alaikum to you.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Chairperson of the South African Muslim Network, Dr. Faisal Suliman, with us this morning. We're going to go for a break, and when we come back, it is going to be time for our weekly Jummah Inspiration. And this morning, we will be with Sheikh Said Inkani, member of the Jamiatul Ulama KwaZulu Natal.